What's up, guys? So I just wanted to make another video before the release of Classic, just explaining the different mage races and how the racials would affect you as a mage. And just a side note before we start, that for the most part, racials aren't game breaking, so just play whatever race you want at the end of the day. But if you're really concerned about min-maxing or just curious how the different racial abilities would affect you as a mage, then I think this video will be really helpful for you. So to start, we're going to start with the Horde side. So Horde can be Undead and Troll, and we're just going to start with Undead and their different racials and what it means for you as a mage. So as an Undead, one of the things you're going to get is Underwater Breathing, which all that basically does is double the amount of time you can be underwater versus not undead. Pretty handy sometimes, especially for leveling and questing. There'll be some times where you need to get things underwater, so it can be pretty helpful. Second thing you're going to get as an undead mage is 10 passive shadow resistance. Now, that on its own isn't really anything. The only thing to consider is when you might be able to stack that with other shadow resist. So for example, Mage Tier 2, the belt, gloves, and helm all have 10 shadow resist. So just a side note as well for mages, pretty much your greatest threats in PvE are going to be warlocks, and also shadow priests are up there as well. And having these three pieces of tier 2 plus being undead would give you 40 shadow resist, which again, nothing too crazy, but when you're facing your hardest opponent, it could definitely help. Another thing to consider is the 5 resist to your cloak. And another thing you could stack it with is the engineering trinket Shadow Reflector. If you're going to be PvPing, chances are you're going to be engineering, and chances are you're going to have this trinket. And this trinket gives another 20 shadow resist. So if you were to wear all these in PvP, that would give you 65 shadow resist, which is pretty good in PvP, and that will give you a nice edge when fighting warlocks or shadow priests. Now the third thing you're going to get as an undead is Cannibalize, which basically allows you to eat the corpse of any humanoid or undead, and it's going to regenerate 7% of your health every 2 seconds. This is on a 2-minute cooldown, and it can be pretty handy, especially in PvP. It's going to give you another bandage, because Cannibalized does not share a cooldown with bandage, so you can use them back to back. And just a note is that it can get interrupted by damage, so you won't be using this too much in combat, but it's pretty handy to have. So the fourth and biggest racial ability that you're going to get as an undead mage is Will of the Forsaken. Now this is an instant cast that breaks and provides immunity to charm, fear, and sleep for 5 seconds. This does not share a cooldown with the PvP trinket, essentially allowing you to break 2 fears back to back. And again, like I said earlier, warlocks and shadow priests are 2 of your biggest threats. This will also be amazing in pre-made BGs, as well as in PvE. There are quite a few bosses that will fear you, and you'll be able to break that fear as an undead and continue DPSing. And that racial alone will probably be the reason undead are most popular, along with just an awesome casting animation. So the next race on Horde that mages can be is Troll. And the first thing that you would get as a Troll is bow specialization and throwing weapon specialization, which means absolutely nothing for mages considering mages can't use either of those weapons. So that racial means nothing to you as a mage. The second racial you're going to get as a troll is called Beast Slaying, which increases damage dealt versus beasts by 5%. This is pretty nice. It's nice while leveling and will be nice for a few boss fights. 5% will just be a small boost, nothing crazy, but it is nice to have. The third racial is a troll. It's called a Regeneration. So this increases your health regeneration rate by 10%, and also allows 10% of total health regeneration to continue during combat. Now, this isn't anything too major, but it's pretty nice considering you have 0 health regeneration rate unless you're a troll. So it's kind of nice. Again, the amount isn't going to be anything game breaking, but it is nice to have. So the last racial you're going to get as a troll, and the most interesting as a mage, is Berserking. So this is an instant cast on a 3-minute cooldown, and basically what it does is it increases your casting speed between 10% and 30% depending on your HP. So the lower your HP, the greater the increased cast speed from this ability. So I wanted to do a little experimenting just to see what kind of effect this would actually have on your cast times. So just as a baseline, your Fireball is a 3-second cast, assuming you're spec'd into it. Your Frostbolt is a 2.5 second cast, and your Polymorph is a 1.5 second cast. So these are the 3 main casts that you'll be doing as a mage, both in PvP and PvE. So if you're at full HP and you activate Berserking, this will make your Fireball a 2.73 cast time, your Frostbolt a 2.27 cast time, and your Polymorph a 1.36 second cast time. So as you can see here, I'm just going to jump off this cliff, damage myself, and I just want to see how low the cast times actually get if you were really low HP. So with a really low HP, it makes your Fireball a 2.31 second cast, your Frostbolt a 1.92 second cast, and your Polymorph a 1.15 second cast. So something else to consider about going Troll Mage is the fact that the Berserking racial does stack with the BWL Mage Trinket Mind Quickening Gem. Mind Quickening Gem increased the mage's cast speed by 33% for 20 seconds. This is on a 5-minute cooldown. And keep in mind, guys, in vanilla, there are not very many abilities that increase your cast speed. Haste didn't become a thing until Burning Crusade for the most part, with one of the few exceptions being the Troll Racial and this Trinket. And they do stack together, so you are able to use this Trinket and Berserking at the same time. And again, I just wanted to do a little experimenting to see how low the cast times actually get with these. So here's the cast time you would get at full HP if you activated both of these at the same time. Fireball is a 2.05 second cast, Frostbolt is a 1.71 second cast, and Polymorph is a 1.02 second cast. So now let's see what'll happen when you activate both at the same time when you have low HP. Fireball 1.74, Frostbolt 1.45, and Polymorph 0.868 second cast. So I'll put a table of all these numbers on the screen just so you can kind of compare and contrast. So after watching that, you're probably thinking, wow, Troll is pretty overpowered, especially with that trinket. And you're definitely right, but keep in mind this Mind Quickening gem drops off Veilstraz from BWL, which if I remember right is the second boss from BWL. And I know when I raided in vanilla, I didn't even see this trinket drop one time. And if it did, it would most likely have gone to the mage class leader of the guild. So if this does drop for you, it's going to be very difficult to get, so just keep that in mind. But even without this trinket, the troll racial is really good, and the best for PvE for sure. And you might even be thinking, well, even in PvP, this seems like it would be an amazing racial to have, which it is, but the reason Undead would still be the best, in my opinion, is let's say for instance, you go to cast on someone, you activate Berserking, and bam, you get into a fear. Well, that troll racial just went to complete waste because you were stuck in a full fear. So that's why Undead would still be the best for PvP in my opinion, and Trolls would be the best for PvE. But again, they're both good in their own way, so if you really prefer one or the other, just go for it. So now we're going to move on to the Alliance side, and for the Alliance, you can either be a human or a gnome. So we're going to start with humans. Humans, to start, get Mace Specialization and Sword Specialization. Now again, this doesn't really matter for mages since we're not a melee class, so no big deal there. And the next thing that humans get is called Diplomacy, which increases your reputation gain by 10%. Now this is somewhat underrated in my opinion. This is really helpful for things like getting your mount or even getting reputation with some of the endgame factions that can give you some pretty nice rewards such as recipes or epic gear. It's also useful for PvP as well because you're going to get the increased reputation with Warsong, Arathi Basin, Alterac Valley, all which give awesome rewards. So as a human, you're just going to be able to get these faster than anybody else, which is pretty nice and pretty underrated. So if you're someone who's going to be doing a lot of reputation grinds, or maybe just wants it to be a little bit easier to get your mount, human's not a bad choice. Now the next thing humans get is called a human spirit, where your spirit is increased by 5%. Now for the most part, this really doesn't have an effect on mages, since we're not really stacking spirit. The only thing it would affect is our evocation ability. So evocation increases your mana regeneration by 1500%, and this is affected by spirit. So the more spirit that you have, the better your evocation is going to be. Now again, it's only 5%, so it's not really game breaking, but it is a nice little boost, especially in PvE when you need as much mana as possible. So the last racial ability you get as a human is called Perception, and when activated, it increases your stealth detection for 20 seconds and is on a 3-minute cooldown. This can be really useful in some situations, for example, going into the flag room in Warsong Gulch, or going up to a flag in Arathi Basin, or if a rogue opens on you and then re-stealths and you activate it, it can give you a greater chance of surprising a druid or rogue out of stealth, and if you do that, you definitely swing that fight in your favor. So this definitely has its uses, especially in PvP, if you know when to use it. So I wanted to do a little bit of testing with Perception, just to see how much of a difference it would actually make. So just a side note, this is on a private server, so this could change in Classic. And also keep in mind the rogue isn't moving, so that would also change things. But I figured it would be worth a test anyway. So this rogue does also have 5 out of 5 Master of Deception. So first, let's just see when I would be able to see this rogue without Perception. So right there, he disappears. And let's see when I would be able to see him. About right there. So again, that's without Perception. Now I'll do the same thing with Perception activated. So there, he disappeared. We'll activate Perception, and right there. So again, this might change in Classic, and this is different when both targets are actually moving, but it's a pretty significant distance in my opinion. This would definitely give you enough distance to knock a rogue out of stealth with Perception activated. So for Alliance, the second race that mages can be is Gnomes. And as a Gnome, the first thing you're going to get is Arcane Resistance, which is just a passive 10 Arcane Resistance. Again, 10 passive resistance, no big deal. You might get lucky and resist a Moonfire or a counterspell every once in a while, but for the most part, it's no big deal. And unlike Shadow, you can't really stack Arcane Resistance that well, so it's just something that's nice to have. So the second thing you're going to get as a Gnome is Expansive Mind, which increases your intellect by 5%. Now, I heard both ways where this does or doesn't scale with your intellect. So I decided to do a little digging, and I found a good post, which I'll post on the screen, by Treasure on Reddit. And assuming this is right and this is the same in Classic, this does scale with gear. So the better gear you have, the more impactful this racial will be. And in his test, he compared a tier 2 mage self-buffed with no talents. And basically, if you were to go human versus gnome, a gnome would get about 400 mana and would get about 0.4% crit versus a human, which would equal about 2 to 3 DPS increase. So technically, if we're comparing apples to apples, gnomes are a little bit better than humans in PvE, but again, it's a pretty small difference at the end of the day, but it's nice to have in PvE, especially, and PvP as well. So the third racial ability you get as a gnome is Engineering Specialization. This increases your max engineering skill by 15. So if you're planning on PvPing a lot, chances are you're going to go engineering, and this will be really helpful just to level a little bit easier. But the main thing with this engineering skill that some people don't know, and I didn't even know until recently, is that this actually has a pretty big impact on one particular trinket, the Arcanite Dragon. So this trinket summons an Arcanite Dragon to fight for you for a minute. Now, normally with skill level 300 engineering, you would summon a level 60 dragon, but as a gnome, your skill is 315, and this dragon's level scales with the level of your engineering. So as a max 315 skill engineer, you actually summon a level 63 pet, which is insanely overpowered. So again, I wanted to do a little experiment just to see how much damage this dragon would do as a level 63. Now for this test, my mage is 315 engineering, and this warrior is a fully decked out tier 2 warrior. So let's see how much damage this dragon will actually do. Now as you can see, this dragon is meleeing and casting. So this is pretty unique. I don't know of really any other pets that do both attack and cast. And on top of that, this dragon applies a debuff that increases fire damage. So all that stacked together makes this a really good trinket. Now, this dragon lasts 1 minute and has a pretty long cooldown. It's a 1 hour, but for good reason, as you can see. It's doing a pretty decent amount of damage, and keep in mind this is a fully decked out tier 2 warrior, so as maybe a squishier target, this would do a lot, and it's also going to increase your fire damage at the same time. So very good trinket, and something that I myself didn't know about, and maybe you didn't up until watching this video. So a pretty cool little trick. And as you can see, it did over 500 damage to this warrior, which is really good considering this is just one trinket. So that pretty much covers everything in regards to racials and how they affect mages. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below and I'll answer them for you. And again, just like I said in the beginning of the video, all of them are good in their own way, so just play what you want. If you're really concerned about min-maxing, on Horde you would want to go Troll for PvE, Undead for PvP. On Alliance, Gnomes take it in PvP and PvE. And if you want just the best overall and you don't care about being Horde or Alliance, Gnome probably takes it in my opinion. Me personally, I'll be playing Horde as an Undead Mage since I'll mostly be PvPing in Classic. Thanks again for watching, and see you all in Classic.